Okay, so this is the scene that we began to create. This is the logo for Airtel that we began to create, and we're just going to try and tie it up as best as we can. Um, as best as we can, so we can touch on some other things. All right, so um, this is the logo that we created, and right now we want to light up this scene. Um, I may not have told you this before, but when you start up Maya, when you begin to consider rendering a scene, Maya has default lights that it uses to render your scene. So you may not have created any lights, and when you push your render button, you still see that there is light enough to um, render out in your scene. This is not light that you created by yourself. It's just light that the software um, uses. All right, but because you cannot control where that light is coming from, it may not be your best bet. All right, if you are doing something professional. All right, so we are going to try and create some of our own lights, and as basically as soon as you do that, Maya's default lights do not work anymore, and then it defaults to the lights that you create by yourself. One thing I want to show you in our render editor, this is where you set the options for your render. All right. Okay. Can't seem to find what I was looking for, but I was looking for the check box that disables lighting the scene by default when you render, which means that even when you create a render, Maya will not create a light unless you create a light, which is kind of different from, okay, this is what I was looking for. Yeah, enable default light. So when you uncheck this and I render again, remember we have not put any lights in our scene, and we're asking it to render. You can see that the it does not render anything. This is because you have unchecked the button that says that Maya should use default lights. But when I check it back on and I try and render again, you can see that again the scene can render. So that's just something to note. As a matter of procedure, I advise that you don't just use the render settings, the default light to render a scene. You want to create your own light, create your own effect on your object, right? So let's close this up um, for a bit and just set this scene up a bit so we can work with it. I want to create a floor plane, right? That will become the floor for this thing that I'm creating. And then I want to quickly um, set it up, set up a background so that the scene looks closer to what you might get in a studio environment. Now I'm doing this so that we get an understanding of how to not just render, but or how to not just create lights, but how to create an atmosphere where what you have created looks good when you are done. All right. I see that a lot of people seem to do renders on black backgrounds, and you want to wonder why. How many times they see black backgrounds as the only kind of background to take to render on. Obviously, in most cases they are just using the default settings that their softwares provide for them. But you want to take a bit more control of your scene uh, generally and do some work on it to make sure that you are getting uh, something that works. All right. So I'm going to try and render this like or create this scene like I'm doing a product shot, a product shot. Um, so this is our background. I'm going to give this a white matte material. So I'm going to go for my Lambert and select white or a slightly off white so that the white does not overpower the scene. All right. So here we are. I'm going to move this off the floor a bit so that we have a bit of space and we can investigate better effects of shadows on this floor system. So something like this, I have to probably increase the length of this foreground area. Okay, so there. So by doing that, you have a sense of what we're trying to create. Let me just quick do a render of this and you can see what happens. Notice that we have still not created any of our own lights. We are still using the default lights in Maya. Alright, so this is what you get. Alright, this is the work of the default light in Maya, but we want to create our own light. So for this kind of object, you want to, if you look, oh, okay, I don't have it here. See, okay, yes, if you look at this image over here, you notice a strong highlight here and here and here. Alright, which means that we can probably assume that there is a strong whitish light that is coming from this direction or just above this direction, and then there's another small one that is shining from the back or from the top. And then we assume that the same light that is hitting this area is also the one causing this area to shine to give off this specular highlight over here. So if you want to try and recreate that, first of all, we need some general lighting in our scene, right? We need some general lighting in our scene, and so we want to create an ambient light. So I come to create light, ambient light. Now, the nature of ambient light is that it's not so much a question of where you put it. The ambient light makes just simply makes sure that when you put it in a scene, it is an omnidirectional light that shines in all directions outwards, but then also returns back another a different, a second set of light rays in the opposite direction. Uh, that is not as strong as the initial one that was sent out, but that returns back light into those areas of the object where um, light may not have reached. There may be shadows. So it kind of just helps us to create softer looking shadow areas where they're not all black. You can see a bit of the um, environment in that, even in the dark regions of our object. So in our case, this area will be the dark region, will be the kind of dark regions that we will expect ambient light to cover this area under here and so on. And the aim is to create something that does not look too dark, because this we want to create an effect where almost everything is lit, which is what is the sort of effect that we have here. Almost everything is lit. You can't see any shadows below this curve, all right? So as that, I will leave the intensity at 1 for now and click on my render button to see the effect of the ambient light. Remember that we said that as soon as you create a light in Maya, the ambient light goes off. All right, so this is the effect of my ambient light. You can see it as the source on the floor right here, and then you can see that these areas that would have been darker before now maintain some light, because this is also a function of where the ambient light is in the scene. So I can take it off the ground so I don't see the reflection there. I may also want to reduce the ambient shade. Remember we talked about ambient shade and how it controls the amount of light in those darker shaded areas. So um, let me increase the shade to about 8. There usually is not no exact um, value to achieve so you make what you want. So you're gonna have to keep working at it, trying different things until you'll probably find what works for you. Okay. Now that I move the ambient light to the back a bit, you can see how you see where the highlight is here, and the shade has increased because this is the area now where the light is coming from the back. So I may have to probably move that back forward again so that the ambient shade can affect not just the back but the front too. And so that our lighting is almost around an area of the ground. So I'm taking an ambient shade back to 2 or from 8 that it was, since the shades are strong. Okay. Now we can see that we're getting something more uniform. All right. Um, Let me just take this to 3 so that I can weigh up that the lighting will be just slightly better. The aim is not to make your scene without any depth. It is simply to just add a bit of light to those darker areas. That is why we're using the ambient shade. And of course, we see we've gotten rid of the shadows in these areas, but we still need the highlight here and here and the edge here. Um, Based on our picture, here, and here. All right. I think we are fine with the look we have on our logo itself. All right. So to create specific lights, now I may just have washed this thing with some light from the top here and expect to see a highlight here. But sometimes you need to be more intentional about the process that you are using to create this. So I'm going to instead create a spotlight. No, okay, not a spotlight, sorry. A point light. Point light. Yes, so that is my point light now. You can see the name here in case you need to be sure you are adding the first. And I'm just going to place it right around the position where my first um, highlight should be. I'm going to try and scale it up a bit, although scaling does not achieve anything on this. So I'm going to put that light there. The aim is that you can't see the point of a point light in itself, but you will see where it affects. All right, so I'm going to just put the intensity to 2 here so that we try and get it to cast some strong light onto that surface. I'm waiting for it to render, and like that, you begin to see the effects of that point light on the surface here. We may need to bring it a bit forward, but let me draw your attention to the shadow that we now have in our scene, and how that light seems to affect every other thing in that scene. And so we want to cancel that out because we only want the light to affect this one. So before we finish, we'll talk about light linking, all right, and shadow linking. So I want to just bring this a bit to the front here, bit to the front and top, and I think I can reduce that intensity back to 1. Um, then test this out again with the render. All right, so you see we have a slightly softer shadow, all right, that is matching what we have here. Um, it seems a bit too strong for now, but we'll work on that compared to our reference. All right, so you can either pull it up a bit more or reduce the intensity, but I'll pull it up and see how it looks. Now, note that this process that you are going through, this is the process you have to go through. It is a process of trial and error until you get the right look. There is no magic, there is no quick fix way. It is always a process that you have to be patient with. So I'm going to try and reduce this to around 0.85 from 1 to try and get this. And let me just get a quick jump by creating my second highlight and placing it just about here. Since we notice that there is another highlight just behind here that is separate from the first one. So this is the kind of advantage you get from a point light, in that because they are separate, you can still manage the way in which the effects are at different points, even though they are close together. So bringing that there, I may have to reduce the intensity to something as low as 0.35 so that the effect does not wash onto this first light that we have here. Right, so we can see the effect of the second light, but it's quite small, so we may have to bring it forward a bit more so that it affects the right area. Then increase that intensity maybe back to 4, 5, or touch. Select my first one and reduce that intensity to about 6. Okay. So we're getting some mix between the first highlight and the second highlight. So we have to fix that by moving this further away. Move this a bit too. Probably move this forward or downwards. Okay. So you need to be careful as you add more light into your scene that you manage how shadows are being created everywhere. Um, okay, so something closer to what we want, but those two lights seem to still be merging. Okay. I'm just gonna go through this and then get back when we have um a good result.